The hostess didn't look up when Miles Osei walked through the door. That wasn't unusual. It was a Tuesday evening at Harborside, the kind of upscale seafood restaurant in Vancouver's Yaletown neighborhood, where the lighting was low and the wine list was longer than most lease agreements. The hostess, a young woman named Brianna with a sleek bun and a headset, was typing something on her screen. She finished what she was doing. She looked up. She looked at Miles, work boots, canvas jacket, the faint smell of the ferry crossing still on him, and her expression went through three different things in about half a second. "Do you have a reservation?" she said. The way she said it wasn't really a question. Miles said yes, he did. Under Osei. 8 o'clock. She typed. She frowned at her screen. She typed again. "I'm not seeing anything. It would be under the restaurant account," Miles said. "Or possibly under the holding company. Harborside Holdings." The frown deepened. "Are you a vendor?" "No," Miles said. "I'm not a vendor." She stared at him for another moment, then picked up the phone on her podium and made a quiet call. Miles waited. He'd been waiting for things most of his life. He was patient the way certain trees are patient, rooted, unmovable, giving nothing away. A man came out from the back. Floor manager, mid-30s, shirt too tight at the shoulders. His name was Darian, and he had the slightly aggressive hospitality of someone who'd been trained to project confidence and had mistaken that for actual authority. "Can I help you?" Darrison said. "Table for one," Miles said. I called ahead. "I'd like something near the kitchen." Darian glanced at Brianna. Some kind of look passed between them. "Sir, Harborside it's a fine dining establishment. We do have a dress code." "I know," Miles said. "I own it." He hadn't planned to say it that way. He'd planned to sit down, order the halibut, drink one glass of the Okanagan Chardonnay he'd put on the list himself 3 years ago, and watch. That was the whole point. He owned 4 restaurants in BC. Harborside was the flagship, and he hadn't been inside any of them without someone knowing who he was in almost 2 years. His operations director kept telling him everything was fine. His quarterly numbers said the same thing. But numbers had a way of not saying what people actually said when they thought no one was listening. He'd had a reason to come tonight that had nothing to do with an audit. He'd gotten a message 2 weeks ago from a longtime customer. Her name was Dorothea. She was 71. She'd been eating at Harborside every Saturday since it opened. And she'd written Miles a letter, an actual letter, on paper, mailed to the holding company's address, to say that something had changed at the restaurant she loved, and she wasn't sure she could come back. She hadn't been specific. She'd written, "I don't know how to describe it exactly. I just know I feel unwelcome now, and I never used to." Miles had folded the letter and put it in his jacket pocket, and he'd kept it there for 11 days before he decided to see for himself. So he sat near the kitchen, at a two-top by the window that looked out over the marina. Darian had recovered quickly once Miles had shown his ID, but the recovery had that particular quality, over-solicitous, slightly panicked, that told Miles everything about what the first 30 seconds would have looked like if he hadn't. A server appeared. Her name tag said Simone. She was in her late 20s, efficient, pleasant. She recited the specials without reading from a card, refilled his water without being asked, and recommended the sockeye over the halibut because the halibut had been sitting since the afternoon delivery. Miles ordered the sockeye. He sipped his wine and he watched. From his seat, he had a partial sightline into the kitchen pass-through and a full view of the dining room floor. Over the next 90 minutes, he watched a lot of things. He watched a couple at the table near the bar get their appetizers brought out in the wrong order and watched the server shrug and walk away. He watched a man in a wheelchair wait 11 minutes at the host stand while Brianna found him a table she could have found in 30 seconds if she'd been looking. He watched a busser named, based on his name tag, Yusuf, maybe 20 years old, work every table on the floor by himself while 2 other staff stood near the bar talking. Yusuf didn't complain. He moved fast and quiet, and he smiled at every table. And then, at about 9:15, Miles watched something that made him stop with his fork halfway to his mouth. 2 servers came through the kitchen door together. One of them he recognized, Simonsen. The other he didn't know. From their body language, they were finishing a conversation they'd started inside. Miles was close enough to hear fragments if he kept still. He kept still. "I don't get why they keep putting him on the floor," the other server said. Her name was Cassie, according to her tag. She was talking about Yusuf. "He's too slow and he doesn't speak properly." "He speaks fine," Simone said. She said it flatly, like she'd said it before. "It makes the guests uncomfortable," Cassie said. "Some of them. You know, the ones who call the front desk. You've seen the notes." "I've seen the notes," Simone said. "I don't agree with the notes." "Darian does," Cassie said. "He told me he's putting it in the review. That Yusuf makes the room feel less." She paused. "He used the word polished." "Polished," Simone repeated. "Yeah." Simone looked at her for a moment. "That's a word for it," she said, and then she walked back onto the floor. Miles set his fork down. He sat very still for a moment, the way a person sits when something they suspected has just been confirmed, and they're deciding what to do about the confirmation. He looked at Yusuf across the dining room. Yusuf was clearing a four-top with quick, careful hands, stacking plates the right way, the way you stack them when someone taught you properly. He glanced up and caught Miles watching him and gave him a small professional nod and went back to the table. Miles paid his bill in cash, left Simone a tip that was large enough to be meaningful without being theatrical, and walked back through the restaurant to the hostess stand. "Is Darian still on tonight?" he said. Brianna looked up. "He's in the back. Get him for me." What happened next wasn't a scene. Miles had no interest in scenes. He'd grown up in a house where his father, who'd come from Accra and built a small empire in commercial property by the time Miles was 12, had told him that the loudest person in any room was usually the least sure of themselves. Miles had spent his whole adult life testing that theory and finding it reliably correct. He and Darian stood near the manager's office at the back of the restaurant. The kitchen noise came through the wall in waves. Darian knew by now who he was talking to, and the earlier confidence had reorganized itself into something that wanted to look like professionalism but was mostly just fear dressed up. Miles asked him about the staffing review, about Yusuf specifically. He didn't mention Cassie's conversation. He didn't need to. He asked Darian to describe in his own words what the issue was. Darian talked about customer feedback. He talked about brand consistency. He used the word polish twice. Miles let him finish. "How long has Yusuf been with us?" Miles said. "About 14 months. And in 14 months, has a customer ever complained about him directly?" "Not to front desk. To you." Darian paused. "There have been notes," I asked, about direct complaints. Another pause. "Not directly to me, no. What's his punctuality like? Good? Any disciplinary actions? No. Any errors, theft, complaints from colleagues? No. I mean, he gets on with everyone. The kitchen staff like him." Miles nodded. "Pull the seating charts for the last month," he said. "I want to see which sections he's been assigned." Darian's expression changed slightly. "I can do that tonight," Miles said. "I'll be here." He went back to his table near the kitchen and ordered coffee, and he waited. The seating charts came back 40 minutes later. Miles looked at them for a while. Yusuf had been working the back corner of the dining room, the section farthest from the window, farthest from the marina view, the one that the host stand routed overflow to. Not the punishment section exactly, but not the section you gave your best server. The other sections had rotated among 4 or 5 people. Yusuf's hadn't rotated in 6 weeks. Miles thought about Dorothea's letter. "I feel unwelcome now, and I never used to." He thought about the couple with the wrong appetizers and the busser who shrugged. He thought about the man in the wheelchair care waiting 11 minutes. He thought about 2 staff members standing at the bar while one 20-year-old quietly carried the whole floor. He asked the server, Simone again. She'd checked on him twice since his second coffee, if Yusuf was finishing soon. "He's done at 10, she said. She looked at Miles carefully, like she was deciding something. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," Miles said. "I'd like to speak to him before he leaves if he's willing." "I'll tell him," Simonson said. Yusuf Ababio came out from the back at 10 past 10 in his street clothes. He was 23, originally from Ghana, had been in Vancouver for 2.5 years on a work permit. He sat across from Miles at the corner table with the careful posture of someone who wasn't sure whether he was about to be congratulated or let go. Miles told him who he was. Yusuf's expression didn't shift much. He said, "I thought you might be. You were watching." "I was," Miles said. "I wanted to ask you something. Okay, do you like this job?" Yusuf thought about it. Not a performance of thinking, actually thinking. "Yes," he said. "I like the work. I'm good at it." He paused. "Some things are harder." "What things?" Yusuf looked at the table for a moment, then back up. "I don't always get the sections I should get," he said. "I see other servers. I know what I can do. I've asked about it. The explanation I get is about customer experience." He said the phrase neutrally, as if he were quoting from a document. "And what do you think that means?" Miles said. "I think it means some customers have preferences," Yusuf said carefully. "And I think the manager has been organizing around those preferences." Miles looked at him. "You've never made a complaint." "No." "Why not?" Yusuf looked at him steadily. "I'm on a work permit," he said. "I've seen what happens to people who make complaints." He said it without self-pity. Just as a fact, the way you state any fact about the structural conditions of your life. "I figured I'd learn everything I could here, and then I'd find somewhere that used it." Miles was quiet for a moment. "I'm going to make some changes," Miles said. "Some of them will be obvious, some won't. I'd like you to stay." Yusuf nodded slowly. "What kind of changes?" "The section rotation will be equitable," Miles said. "It'll be on a formal schedule posted, so there's no discretion about who goes where. The review Darian is writing will be reviewed by HR before it goes anywhere, and there's a floor supervisor position that's been open for 4 months." He looked at Yusuf. "I want you to apply for it." The quiet that followed was the kind that has weight in it. Yusuf didn't say thank you right away. He looked at Miles the way you look at something you've wanted for long enough that you've stopped letting yourself want it, and you need a moment before you can let yourself want it again. "Okay," Yusuf said. Miles called his VP of operations from the parking lot. It was nearly 11. The marina was still, the lights on the water doing their slow work. He gave her a summary of what he'd seen and what he'd decided. She was quiet through most of it. She was the kind of person who was quiet when she was processing and loud when she had questions, and she had a lot of questions. He answered them all. Then she said, "Darian's been there 4 years. I know. He'll push back." "That's fine," Miles said. "That's what HR processes are for." He could hear her typing. "And the rotation schedule, you want it implemented across all 4 locations?" "Yes," Miles said. "And I want a reporting line that doesn't go through floor managers. If a server has a complaint about section assignments or treatment, I want them able to report it without the complaint landing on the desk of the person they're complaining about." More typing. "I'll have a draft to you by Thursday." "Good." He stood in the parking lot for another minute after he hung up. It was a cool Vancouver night, the kind where the air has a bit of the ocean in it, and the city feels almost quiet if you find the right angle. He thought about Dorothea's letter. He'd have to call her. He'd been putting it off because he hadn't known what he'd say, but now he did. He thought about what Yusuf had said. "I figured I'd learn everything I could here, and then I'd find somewhere that used it." The particular dignity of that, the patience of someone who decided that what happened to him was ultimately less important than what he made of what happened to him. Miles had built his first restaurant on borrowed money and a lease in a neighborhood his investors thought was too risky. He'd been told twice by people who should have known better that the industry wasn't for him. Once directly, once in a way that was meant to seem like advice. He remembered both conversations with a clarity that time hadn't softened. He understood something about carrying a capacity that other people couldn't see. The changes happened over the next 3 weeks in the way that changes happen when someone with real authority decides they're not optional. The section rotation schedule went up in the staff room on a Friday, laminated, with an explanation attached. Darian had 2 conversations with HR that Miles was not present for but was briefed on afterward. At the end of the second one, Darian submitted his resignation. He sent Miles an email that was professional in tone and said nothing that either of them would have believed. The new reporting structure went into the handbook. An anonymous feedback system was set up. Nothing elaborate, a simple form, routed to HR and to Miles's office directly, bypassing every layer of management in between. Brianna, the hostess, had a meeting with the general manager. She was young, and she'd been absorbing a culture without fully realizing she was absorbing it. The meeting was documented. She was put on a performance plan that was specific about what improvement looked like. She met every benchmark. Simone got a small bonus that appeared in her next paycheck without announcement. She called the main office to ask what it was for. The person who took the call said it was a recognition payment for outstanding service, which was true as far as it went. Yusuf applied for the floor supervisor position. He was one of 3 applicants. He was not the only qualified one, but he was the one who, when asked in the interview how he would handle a staff member, treating certain guests differently than others, gave an answer that was specific and considered, and showed he'd already thought about it more than once. He got the job. His first shift as supervisor was a Saturday night. Full house, 2 private events, one of the line cooks calling in sick. He handled it. The kitchen staff already liked him. The floor adapted quickly, the way a floor adapts when the person running it is calm and knows what they're doing. Dorothea came back on a Saturday in November. Miles hadn't told her he was coming, but he'd asked the host to let him know when she arrived. He came in through the side entrance and found her at her usual table near the window, the same table she'd had every Saturday for years. She was looking out at the water. She looked like a woman who had braced herself for disappointment and was surprised to find she didn't need to. Her server that night was Yusuf. Miles watched from a distance as Yusuf introduced himself, made a recommendation she hadn't asked for, but turned out to be exactly right, refilled her water at the exact right moment, and left her to her meal without hovering. Dorothea ate slowly, the way people eat when they're tasting something, and also somewhere else at the same time. When she was leaving, she stopped at the host stand and said something to the young woman there. A new hire, not Brianna, and the young woman smiled and said she'd pass it on. Miles caught Dorothea at the door. She looked at him and then she looked at him properly, the way she might have looked at him if she'd known who he was. "Did you get my letter?" she said. "I did," Miles said. "I wasn't sure it would go anywhere." "It went somewhere," he said. She nodded, and she looked back at the dining room for a moment, the low lights, the marina view, the tables full of people eating well. "It feels right again," she said. "I don't know what you did, but it feels right." Miles thought about the walk across the parking lot 2 months ago. The ferry smell still on his jacket, the hostess who hadn't looked up. He thought about Yusuf saying, "I figured I'd find somewhere that used it." He thought about how many people decide that too early and walk away from places that didn't deserve to lose them. "Same time next week?" Miles said. Dorothea smiled. "Same time next week." Outside, the water was dark. The last of the October light had gone and the marina was just shapes and reflections. Miles stood on the sidewalk for a minute before getting in his car. There was a restaurant 2 blocks away, a new one, that he'd been watching for 6 months. The owners were a young couple from Montreal who'd moved west and put everything they had into a 40-seat room with a menu that changed weekly. He'd eaten there 3 times as a stranger, paid his own bill, tipped well, and asked no questions. He was going back next week, and he still hadn't decided whether to tell them who he was. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd just keep eating the food and watching how they treated people, and let that be enough for a while. Some things you learn better when no one knows you're paying attention.